Hello and welcome. You are watching Gravitas Plus. I am Molly Gambhir. What comes to your mind when you hear United States of America? Big banks, science fiction movies, state-of-the-art buildings, gun terror, racism, or drugs? But one word that rarely crosses our minds immediately is debt. You know, the money that countries borrow to improve their growth. Do you know how America ranks when it comes to debt? Well, it comes right on top. No kidding here. Have a look at the numbers. In terms of raw dollars, the country with the highest debt in the world is unquestionably the United States of America. It has a total national debt of $31 trillion. That's about $94,175 for every single American citizen. And who does America owe all that money to? A host of parties, banks, investors, pension funds, insurance companies, foreign investors, also foreign governments. Yes, America owes a large amount of its debt to other countries. And which countries are these? Well, nearly half of all US foreign-owned debt comes from 5 countries. That's Japan, China, the UK, Belgium, and Luxembourg. And if we break them down into numbers, the US owes over $1,000 billion to Japan. That's around 14.88% of its foreign debt. China ranks second. It accounts for $870 billion or 11.96% of America's foreign-owned debt. The UK, meanwhile, accounts for $645 billion or 8.88% of America's foreign-owned debt. Belgium accounts for $332 billion, Luxembourg accounting for $312.9 billion of America's foreign-owned debt. And besides them, America also owes money to Brazil, Switzerland, Germany, Ireland, Singapore, South Korea, and India. Have a look at this report. America owes India over $216 billion in loans. Yes, it has the audacity to preach India on what's right and what isn't, supposedly. My point is simple. For a country that boasts of being the most powerful economy in the world, a country that calls itself a leading financial powerhouse, owing so much money to foreign governments it either tries to preach or fight or control, is embarrassing to say the least. It treats the UK as its right hand, but owes over $645 billion to London. And it issues lectures of morality to India, but owes $216 billion to New Delhi. And what explains this? Why is Washington in debt to these countries? Because of a concept called treasuries. Let me explain this to you. The US government finances the operations of its different federal agencies by issuing treasury securities or treasuries. These are basically debt obligations that are divided into 3 categories: treasury bills, treasury bonds, and treasury notes. And all of them can be directly purchased from the US government or through a bank or broker. And who can buy these treasuries? Anybody, from investors to banks to foreign governments. They can all cash in on these bonds when they reach maturity. And why have they bought this debt? Well, one of the main reasons why foreign investors buy US Treasury securities is that they are one of the most secure assets in the world. Holding them can be advantageous because it is a widely accepted currency in international trade and transactions. They also offer a higher rate of return as compared to other government bonds available worldwide. But that said, investing in US Treasuries is also a deliberate strategy for some countries. China has been using these bonds to keep the yuan weaker than the US dollar so that it can benefit from low import prices. In fact, some analysts and investors fear that China could dump these treasuries in retaliation and that this weaponization of its holdings would send interest rates higher, potentially hurting America's economic interests. All said and done, the biggest question here is, Why is America's national debt so high? Well, this is a result of simple mathematics. Each year, there is a mismatch between America's revenues and the money that it spends. In other words, the American government spends more than it takes in or earns. And why is that happening? There are a host of reasons for this. The first is demographics. You see, America is undergoing significant demographic change. The society is aging as the large baby boom generation begins to retire, and reports say over 10,000 people will turn 65 every day till 2029. Moreover, people are expected to live longer on average. That is great news, but it means that America must also pay for the financial needs of longer retirement. And these huge demographic trends put increasing pressure on the federal budget, and in particular on vital programs that serve older and vulnerable Americans, like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. And the second reason is rising healthcare costs. In many ways, healthcare is the most important issue for America's fiscal and economic future. It represents nearly 1/5 of America's entire economy, and it is the second fastest growing part of the budget. That said, America does not really get what it pays for. It spends over twice as much on healthcare as other advanced countries. This spending is projected to rise by 68% over the next decade and will exceed all other categories of federal spending in 2030. But the services it provides are not paid for in their entirety by the people. And this leaves the healthcare sector with a significant debt. The third driving factor behind America's debt burden is inadequate revenue. The US tax system, you see, does not generate enough revenues to cover the spending policymakers have enacted. And this rapidly growing imbalance between the revenues and the spending leads to higher and higher annual deficits. And the result is an increasing national debt. The result is this: America could hit its first ever debt default. And this default could drop America's gross domestic product, or GDP, by 4%. It could lead to 7 million workers losing their jobs and lead to $750 billion in higher federal borrowing costs over the next decade. Just to put it simply, a debt default could harm America's global leadership position and raise questions about its ability to defend its national security interests. And this, by the way, is something that America cannot afford right now, given how China and Russia could try to take advantage of this on the world stage and embarrass Washington. So is there a way out of this? Well, for this crisis to be resolved, the Republicans and the Democrats will have to strike a compromise, an agreement to raise the debt ceiling. The deadline to do so expires on the 1st of June, so the clock is ticking. And here's hoping they are able to reach consensus.